enterprises find benefit in really creating an M2M strategy? You mentioned things like logistics and supply chain, some of these other what you would associate with enterprise business processes. Where do you see M2M fitting in those spaces?
An enterprise is only interested for two reasons, Kevin. They either are spending money and investing in technology to save money, or they're investing in technology to make money. And I think, up until quite recently, the majority of, and I'm now talking, by the way, about the enterprise. I'm not talking about the consumer who has a wholly different reason for wanting to buy, I don't know, a wirelessly connected digital picture frame, which will be the novelty of the month and then is forgotten again in a month's time.
Yes.
The businessman is focused on saving money or making money. And to date, we've really used technology to save money. It's been used for preventative care, traditionally for maintenance reasons, or as you mentioned, supply chain and logistics. I want to actually manage the supply chain more efficiently. So I want to know where my pallet of computers is if I'm Dell Computer. I want to know if I'm shipping burgers across the country for Burger King, that they've stayed at an appropriate temperature throughout the 3 days or 4 days that they've been driving across the country.
Very interesting.
The guy hasn't taken the refrigeration unit off, partway through the trip. And these kind of things are very specific to individual industries. For example, if you freeze burgers and you let them thaw out and you freeze them again, before they get to the store, they kind of look okay. But the reality is they just don't last as long on the shelf. So one of the, you and I have probably had this rather peculiar experience. We buy, say, a gallon of milk at some point in the summer. We take it home. Within 15 minutes, it's in the fridge. But for some strange reason, we find that the milk goes sour really quickly, maybe only a few days after we bought it, maybe still be within its expiry date. The reason for that is that milk probably sat out on a dock somewhere and got warm at some point in the distribution chain, or went over its temperature. So the supply chain, and particularly cold chain management, is a quite aggressive adopter of machine-to-machine technology, doing several things. One is managing the maintenance cycles of, say, the refrigeration units. Big companies, like Thermo King, are very heavily involved in this marketplace.
Okay.
The actual folks that manage the supply chain want to manage it efficiently. So companies like Cisco, does the SYSCO, Cisco, use this technology to ensure that they don't have significant spoilage, for example, in the distribution. Large organizations like Del Monte are using it for shipping pineapples and bananas, which may be in a 2 or 3 or 4 week service cycle as they're being shipped from a farm in Costa Rica and maybe ending up in a supermarket in Germany. And at each and every time, they want to know what the status is of that container, even though it's gone through perhaps multiple different modes of transportation. So they have sensors perhaps on the coolers, on the reefers themselves, and they actually monitor this stuff themselves. So
Alex, if I could, let me ask you to explain in a little bit more detail what is really involved in that process. Let's just use pineapples as an example. What actual pieces of equipment are involved, and how does that information get back to the CPG logistics man or supply chain manager who wants to know that status? What pieces are all involved to get that data back to the enterprise guy?
It's a micro-segmented industry, and so you typically see application service providers that really thoroughly understand one of these micro-segments.
Okay.
Who doing a pretty significantly well-integrated turnkey solution, which is a box of some type. The box has typically got sensors on it that maybe monitor temperature. They could monitor, air, humidity, a whole variety of things in the particular example for the pineapples and bananas. Then, in order to make it cost efficient, those devices are set up in such a way that they only send information if a certain set of parameters has been transgressed. So let's say there's no point in me knowing that they're being kept at +2 degrees centigrade, because that's what I want them to be kept at.
Right.
What I'm interested in is if they go below 5 or perhaps above 10. At that point, they send exception alarms over the wireless network, wherever they may be anywhere in the world, to some form of back-end application that's come from this application provider.
Okay.
That application itself can perhaps trigger some form of response. It could be a human intervention. It could be, say, a command to the refrigeration unit to turn itself down a couple of notches. It could be a variety of different
so this is just not
get taken.
This is not just one directional information coming in.
Bidirectional.
It can be bidirectional, so you can send instructions back that can actually do something, turn up the temperature, turn down the temperature, all those kinds of things as well. Is that how I understand it?
Absolutely. I mean, that's where the critical value lies. Remember, these devices could be sitting miles, tens of miles, hundreds or even thousands of miles away from where a person who knows anything about this industry is actually sitting at any one time. So it gives them the power to be able to make proactive, conscious decisions on how to improve the performance of that particular part of their business. I mean, let me give you an extreme example. We have not too far away, Kevin, from where you sit, actually, in the central United States. We have completely unmanned locomotives pulling freight trains. Those unmanned locomotives are being driven by drivers who, in effect, are sitting on the equivalent of what looks for all the world like an Xbox game. And they're driving these things from 200, 300 miles away. Where are the advantages of this? Well, apart from the fact that you haven't got the guys on the trains, when the engines are idling for more than a certain period of time because they're sitting in, to the sides, they can shut the engines down. They shut the engines down, they use less fuel. They put less into the atmosphere. They can shut the aircon systems down inside of the locomotives themselves instead of having to leave them idling, and so on and so forth. So there's all sorts of interesting applications, and we're just touching the surface, to be absolutely truthful. Wow,
that is fascinating. The whole thing around MDM is fascinating to me, but I know we're running out of time here. So let me ask you to explain to all of us here, Alex, in that chain or that M2M chain where you have the networks, you have the equipment, the sensors, and the portals, what role does core telematics play in that chain?
We're either the pesky or the vital, depending on which way you look at it, component that actually gets the data from where it's been generated to where action is going to be taken, whether it's over the cellular network or over the satellite network. From that perspective, we look very much like a carrier. I mean, we do indeed buy capacity from our carrier partners. But what the critical component that we bring is very, very high degrees of reliability through redundant data centers, specialized portals which allow our customers to manage the network as if they owned the network in effect. They can look at usage in real time, the status of devices in real time, do diagnostics on their machines that are outside in the field in real time. And because of a number of the more advanced capabilities we've got built into our platforms, we're able to do things like over-the-air upgrades and fault fixes, both in the connectivity side and indeed in the devices, many times over the air without having to resort to having to roll a truck and send a technician to a location which could be significant distance away.
Absolutely. Well, Alex, I want to thank you so much for sharing with our listeners today your background, core telematics, and what M2M is and the role M2M plays in many large enterprises. And I'm looking forward to more of the convergence between enterprise mobility and M2M. Thank you again for joining us, Alex.
Kevin, thank you for inviting me. It's been most enjoyable.